Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Russian President Vladimir Putin is calling in 300,000 more troops as the war in Ukraine rages on. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney was in Vancouver recently discussing the next phase of the Alberta is Calling campaign. And if you make over $40,000 a year in Canada, more money will be coming off of your paycheck. Franco Terrazzano from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation will explain.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. As the war in Ukraine enters into its 8th month, many are wondering if we will ever see a ceasefire and an end to the war once and for all. According to the United Nations, there have been more than 14,000 casualties since the war broke out on February the 24th. Well, it appears as though there's no end in sight. Russian President Vladimir Putin is doubling down. Officials say 300,000 Russian reservists are being called into the war in Ukraine. Putin has also accused the West of, quote, nuclear blackmail.
И о высказываниях некоторых высокопоставленных представителей ведущих государств НАТО о возможности и допустимости применения против России оружия массового поражения, ядерного оружия. Тем, кто позволяет себе такие заявления в отношении России, хочу напомнить, что наша страна также располагает различными средствами поражения, а по отдельным компонентам и более современными, чем у стран НАТО. И при угрозе территориальной целостности нашей страны для защиты России и нашего народа мы, безусловно, используем все имеющиеся в нашем распоряжении средства.
Ukrainian farms near the front lines are facing constant shelling that is damaging fields and making life extremely difficult for farmers who are trying to harvest crops and plant in more fields.
Вже до цього привикли. Перші дні страшно, звісно, а зараз вже до цього чоловік привикає. І, а що, робити треба. Розумієте? Якщо ми це все бросимо, ну ми бросимо, другі бросять, тоді що буде? Дуже важко. Тому що з учетом того, що у нас тут наложено, коли його це все приберуть, тільки ми тоді, мабуть, зможемо робити. Щось отримати, а так буде дуже важко.
Meanwhile, here in Canada, the Greens outlined their party's legislative priorities for the fall sitting on Parliament Hill. Green Party MP and former party leader Elizabeth May says for her group right now, it's all about climate change.
The most recent scientific study that made me sit back and once again wonder, can we get through this? Are we serious as a species that we'd like to keep living on this planet? Is the most recent paper from Science. It was published last week. It was carried on most of your networks, but it wasn't necessarily totally clear that exceeding 1.5 degrees global warming could trigger multiple climate tipping points. I don't think anybody in the Liberal cabinet has read this paper. I don't even know that Environment Canada understands the extent of the climate emergency. One of those tipping points identified globally now is the Labrador Current. I'll just say we've talked about the Labrador Current last session of Parliament when another paper in Nature identified that the Gulf of St. Lawrence, which is Canada's most productive marine ecosystem, was already experiencing a loss of oxygen and increasing acidification. Why? Because the Labrador Current is slowing down.
Stats Canada released its 2021 census data on Canada's Indigenous peoples on Wednesday. Now, according to the recent statistics, around 1.8 million people were counted as Indigenous, with half being First Nations. That represents around 5% of Canada's total population. Now, that's an increase from 2020, which was at 4.9%. Chris Penny with Stats Canada says the bulk of our Indigenous peoples live in the central part of the country.
Ontario had the largest Indigenous population of all provinces and territories in 2021 at 406,590 people. British Columbia had the next largest Indigenous population, followed by Alberta and Manitoba. Indigenous people made up a large share of the total population in the territories, accounting for over 4/5 of the population of Nunavut, almost half in the Northwest Territories, and over 1/5 in Yukon. Provincially, Manitoba's population had the highest share of Indigenous people, followed by Saskatchewan, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Alberta.
The Canadian Taxpayers Federation released a new report which says that while 51 national governments around the world were cutting taxes to help provide relief during the pandemic and inflation, the Trudeau Liberals actually raised taxes. Now, to discuss this in more detail is the federal director of the CTF, Franco Terrazzano, who joins us once again from Ottawa. Franco, I thought the federal government was trying to make life more affordable for Canadians.
Al, you would think, but at the very least, it should have been a no-brainer for the federal government to not raise taxes during the middle of a pandemic and as inflation soared. But unfortunately, the federal government did raise taxes. It raised the carbon tax, it raised payroll taxes, and it raised alcohol taxes. Now, while Ottawa was sticking Canadians with higher tax bills, we found that there was 51 other national governments that did the right thing and provided their citizens with relief. So that included more than half of the G7 countries, more than half of G20 countries, and 2/3 of OECD countries. So Ottawa is making life more expensive for Canadians by raising taxes, while other countries are cutting their tax bills.
Now, as you said, the federal government is increasing the carbon tax, alcohol, and payroll taxes. Let's focus on that for just a moment here. If you make more than $40,000 a year, you'll see a bit of a hit.
If you're making more than $40,000 this year, then your federal income tax bill is going up because of the fourth annual payroll tax hike in a row. Now, if you look at all the taxes that you pay, if you look at the property taxes, the income taxes, the business taxes from all levels of government, the average family is paying about 43% of their budget just to taxes alone. So here's the thing. Canadians are paying too much tax because we have politicians wasting too much of our money. And we could see a federal income tax cut if the Trudeau government wasn't wasting money like announcing hundreds of millions of dollars to companies like Bombardier, or giving 300,000 federal bureaucrats pay raises during lockdowns, or spending thousands of dollars on sex toy shows in Germany. So what we need to do is we need to see Trudeau stop wasting so much money so Canadians can pay less taxes.
Thanks so much, Franco. That was Franco Terrazzano, federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining us from Ottawa. Well, Thursday's the first official day of fall, and you can definitely feel the change in the air. A little bit of a different weather pattern here in southwestern Alberta. It's been cooler. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, the mercury dropped a little in our region, and some rain may be on the way as well.
Yeah, that's right, Hal. In fact, we could see as much as 5 millimeters of rainfall on a Thursday. Thursday also bringing with it some much cooler weather than what we've been used to. And I know you were talking about how it's been cooling down lately. Well, try 12 degrees as the high tomorrow. Not exactly flip-flop weather, but behold, warmer, sunnier days are on the horizon very soon. And I will have all those details along with the 7-day forecast for you coming up later on in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Premier Jason Kenney announced the launch of the next phase of the Alberta is Calling campaign. It will continue to offer skilled workers from across the country a glimpse into what life would be like here in Alberta.
There is a place in this country where you can afford to own a home and where you can also benefit from the highest incomes and lowest taxes available anywhere in Canada. That place is called Alberta. We're also launching today a renewed Alberta is Calling campaign out west in Vancouver. And we've chosen Vancouver and Toronto for a very obvious reason, because these are two great Canadian cities, but increasingly they've become unaffordable for ordinary families to make a living and to own a home in the Greater Toronto and Greater Vancouver regions. Alberta has long been one of the most prosperous parts of Canada. But what Torontonians and Vancouverites may not know is that we have the highest incomes in the country and the lowest taxes, but the cost of living difference now is dramatic.
Former Alberta Children's Services Minister Rebecca Schultz is running to become Alberta Premier. The party will choose its new leader on October the 6th. She says she has what it takes to unite the Conservatives and become the new leader of the UCP. Schultz also says when it comes to health care, she has a solid plan in place.
Primary care has to be a priority in terms of how we recruit physicians, coming up with innovative and unique ways to get more young people from rural communities getting into med school and coming back and serving as a family doc in their local community. I think there is a lot that can be done there. And working with different areas across the province, because the needs in Lethbridge may not be the same as in Bonnyville, for example, right? So we have a really good opportunity ahead of us to work with those communities and get more family docs in the system.
Make sure you catch the full in-depth interview with UCP leadership hopeful Rebecca Schultz coming up after Business News. According to the latest census data, more Canadians are renting rather than owning homes. Stats Canada says 2/3 of Canadians owned a home in 2021, but that is down from a peak of 69% 10 years ago. The decline is highest among young adults, with the rate dropping from 44.1% to 36.5% for those between the ages of 25 to 29. Stats Canada also says the number of renter households grew at more than twice the rate of owner households over the last decade. Now, one of the stories we featured here in Bridge City News is how higher interest rates are forcing a market correction in some of Canada's larger real estate markets, including Vancouver and Toronto. House prices have been dropping 10, 20, even 30% in some regions. Now, that's not necessarily the case here in southwestern Alberta. Jeff Reimer is a real estate agent with Royal LePage South Country Real Estate, and he joins us here in Lethbridge. Jeff, what are you seeing here in the Windy City? Are house prices also dropping?
Well, things have certainly calmed. The interest rate hikes, and the feds are saying they may do that again, and continued slightward up pressure there. They just want to keep stalling inflation, right? That's a big problem for the politicians. They caused the problem, so they're just going to do whatever they can to stop inflation. But it's calmed it, but Lethbridge is still very stable. Southern Alberta, very stable. We've got good farmers, we have industry, agriculture. You know, oil affects us, but even with the price of oil, that's helping our province. So we're finding it right now that the market's pretty stable. It has calmed. There's a bit more listings than there was the first half of the year. And so that's, you know, the higher end prices calmed that more than the lower prices. You know, starter houses, still some tough to find some good houses. So you got to really look and be on the ball and jump on them new, especially like under 250. It's really slim pickings for starter houses.
Yeah, let's touch on that for just a moment here, Jeff. How much of an impact are higher mortgage rates having, especially on first-time home buyers?
It's definitely calming down the amount that they can spend, because it affects their qualifying and then, of course, their payments. So it is calming that down a little bit, but the buying is still strong. The rates have almost doubled, though, in the last couple of years. That can mean about 2 years ago, they're maybe right around 2.3 for a 5-year fixed. And right now, you're looking at about 4.59 for the best fixed rates. They went up a little higher, closer to 5, and then maybe came down again.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. That was Jeff Reimer, realtor with Royal LePage South Country Real Estate, joining us from Lethbridge. Lethbridge Police, along with other first responders, took part in a training exercise on Wednesday morning. The event was a full-scale mock event to help emergency crews respond to an incident accordingly. The simulation included actors who pretended to sustain injuries from a mass casualty incident. The responders were faced with a challenge on how to handle the situation in a timely manner. The city says they aim to do these training sessions once a year, but are legislated to do it every 4 years. Lethbridge Police tweeted that they need help locating a male wanted in connection with a variety of break-and-enters and attempted break-and-enters where the suspect was armed with a knife. Police say to be on the lookout for 23-year-old Mitchell shot both sides of Glenwood. He faces various charges, including housebreaking, possession of a dangerous weapon, and resisting arrest. The incidents occurred in October of 2019. Now, since that time, he's failed to show up at court, and police efforts to locate him have been unsuccessful. If you can help police with their investigation, you're asked to call them right away at 403-328-4411. Soaring prices due to inflation and supply chain issues around the world are forcing more and more people to rely on food banks. In Lethbridge, the Interfaith Food Bank has seen a 30% rise in the number of clients this year. Now, to cope with the demand, the food bank is looking for volunteers to help them out. Volunteer coordinator for the organization, Bill Sellis, says there are many ways you can help out.
We have everything from administration to actually preparing some of the vegetables that are used to go out to clients. We have people that meet the clients and deal with their requests. We have people that glean through the warehouse, which is picking up product that we have available and providing it to other organizations in the city.
Celis encourages those who can commit to 3 to 4 hours a week of volunteering to email them at volunteer@interfaithfoodbank.ca. A unique sport is taking off here in southwestern Alberta. It is called the Warrior Horse Relay. And if you've never seen it, you're in for a special treat. If you live in southwestern Alberta, you get a chance to experience this event up close and personal this weekend. BCN's Naveen Day has the details.
A Warrior Horse Relay is an exciting horse and rider team event that takes place on a racetrack. Competitors race against each other on horseback to determine which team can compete the required number of laps on the track the fastest. After the completion of a lap, the players have to run and jump onto a different horse's back prior to starting the next lap. This weekend's tournament is expected to be the largest relay race in Alberta. Calvin Plain Eagle is the owner of the Blackfoot team Anatopsy, which, translated into English, means cute. He says tradition plays an important role in what is one of North America's oldest sports.
That's what we want to do, slowly bring our tradition out to these races. And it seems like we're the only Indian relay team that dressed up this year as a traditional style. We've seen it in the United States in 2019. One team came out, all tradition, and that looked really nice. It looked awesome.
Now, here in Alberta, horse racing is an agriculturally based industry touching communities across the province through a diverse range of businesses. In 2019, the economic benefit of horse racing in Alberta was $312 million, representing an increase of 7% since 2015. CEO of the Rocky Mountain Turf Club, Max Gibb, says that hosting horse racing events like the one this weekend is vital to keeping the sport alive in Alberta.
The Warrior Relay Race is the oldest sport in America, and it's having a rejuvenation, and it is changing lives and community of our First Nations. They're so excited about it. There are over 40 teams now in Alberta. There's 15 to 20 in southern Alberta, and it is having a humongous influence on the young people in the community.
Many of the athletes competing this weekend started off as troubled youth with a history of crime and mischief. Since they started training, they have not only turned their lives around, but stayed clean and sober for the past 2 years. The races take place at the Rocky Mountain Turf Club, September 23rd to 25th. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
That looks like an exciting time. You know, even though the first official day of fall is not until Thursday, it felt a lot cooler today in Lethbridge. Some moisture is also on the way. A full look at the big weather picture is coming up. You know, if you want to take your dog for a walk tonight, you may want to put on a warm sweater or a jacket. We're dropping down to single-digit temperatures once again here in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Roche is in now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, we're almost at the point of maybe putting one of those cute little warm sweaters on our dogs as well.
Yeah, well, last night might have also been a good night to put a sweater on Dexter because we reached some frost last evening, and an overnight low of 2 degrees. This evening, though, a low of 6 degrees. Into Thursday, not much higher. We're looking at a high of 12. We're looking at periods of rain up to 5 millimeters. Into Friday, though, there we go. We're back to the sunshine. 20 degrees as a high, up to 21 on Saturday, back to 20 on Sunday. And then look at that, Monday up to 27 and a beautiful 29 degrees on Tuesday with lots of sunshine. See, I told you it wasn't quite over yet. Average high for this time of year, 19 degrees, average low at 4. 32 degrees, that was our high temperature on this day back in 1938. And in 1995, we had our chilliest, which was only -7. So let's be happy for what we have now. 7:16, that's when the sun rose this morning. Sun is set this evening at 7:33. Giving us 12 hours and I think it's 21 minutes or something like that of daylight. 12 hours and 17 minutes. There we go. Sunshine on the west coast tomorrow. 19 degrees the high in Victoria with some light winds. Windier in the Juan de Fuca Strait though. 19 in Vancouver with sunshine. 23 in Edmonton. Sunny skies with 20 to 40 K winds, and 18 degrees in Calgary with increasing cloud throughout the afternoon. In the rest of the prairies, we're looking at Saskatchewan. The high in Saskatoon, 20 degrees. with sunshine, sunny skies also in Regina with increasing cloud by noon. 18 degrees the high there, 17 the high in Winnipeg. Starting out sunny, going to see some increasing clouds there as well. Up to 30 to 50 winds in Winnipeg expected. Now, Toronto and Ottawa looking at 40% chance of showers tomorrow. 15 the high in Toronto, 14 in Ottawa, 16 the high in Montreal. Montreal also looking at a 40% chance of showers. Could see up to 60 winds, though. Going to be kind of windy. 17 the high in Fredericton. Halifax looking at a high of 20 degrees. Mix of sun and cloud. Rain starting in the evening. Same thing for Charlottetown, 18 degrees there. Now, Hurricane Fiona, we are tracking that. It is potentially going to be a severe weather event reaching Atlantic Canada by Friday and into Saturday. It's expected to mix up with a trough system, so it could bring potentially damaging weather conditions to especially Nova Scotia and PEI later on this week. 16 the high tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland with 2 to 4 millimeters of rain expected there and up to 60 winds. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Bank of Canada Deputy Governor Paul Beaudry says governments and central banks should have withdrawn stimulus measures earlier as economies recovered from the pandemic. Beaudry says in hindsight, that likely would have kept a lid on inflation.
If all the countries at the international level maybe have kind of slowed down a bit there or taken out some of their stimulus a bit sooner, maybe for the world as a whole we could have been better off.
Beaudry says the stimulus spillover also contributed to supply chain bottlenecks around the world. At the same time, Beaudry says the measures contributed to a faster than expected bounce back for the Canadian economy. The U.S. Federal Reserve is expected to raise its key short-term rate by 3/4 of a point for the third consecutive time. Many Fed watchers will be paying close attention to Chairman Jerome Powell's remarks at a news conference afterward. When Powell spoke at an economic conference last month, he issued a blunt warning. He said the Fed's drive to curb inflation includes being aggressive by raising interest rates. He realizes that would bring some pain for Americans. The Bank of Canada will be watching what the U.S. Federal Reserve does with interest. Electric vehicles seem to be gaining in popularity right now. Now, the big issue for many Canadians is their range. How far can you actually go in a single charge? Doug Liu is a board member and strategic advisor with Aptera Motors, which specializes in EVs, and he says you can go a lot further with their vehicles since they incorporate solar panels into their technology.
In addition to the design, in addition to the battery capabilities, solar is another innovation that we created. So we have these very small solar panels that we can adhere to different parts of the vehicle, and they are, in layman terms, bendable in different ways so that they will fit seamlessly into the design.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Doug Liu from Aptera Motors and BCM producer Michael Clausen coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 184 points on the day to finish at 19,184. The Dow was down 522 points to 30,183. The S&P 500 was down 66 on the day to 3789. And the Nasdaq was down 204 points to 11,220. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 98 cents to 82.96 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 4 cents to 7.75 U.S. Gold was even on the day at 1673.89 U.S. an ounce, and silver was down a cent to 19.56 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.29 per bushel, barley's at $8.75. Canola's at $18.05, and corn is at $11.81 per bushel. Live cattle were down 43 cents to $145.88. Feeder cattle were down 80 cents to $179.23, and lean hogs were down $1.55 to $94.43. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 74.28 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he's adding 300,000 reservists to the war in Ukraine. There does not appear to be an end in sight to the 7-month war, which the UN says has seen more than 14,000 casualties. It appears as though the technology behind electric vehicles is being taken to a new level. Some even have solar panels on them, which charge your vehicle as you drive. Doug Liu from Aptera Motors will share details with us momentarily. And listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
With federal government targets for phasing out gasoline-powered engines in just a matter of years, electric vehicles are becoming the order of the day as an alternative. One North American company that has a very unique vehicle coming to market is Aptera. And joining me today from Vancouver is board member and strategic advisor Doug Liu.
Nice to meet you.
So, Doug, first off, I must say change is a little hard. What does your company see as the biggest hurdle for the public adoption of electric vehicles?
I think it's always about understanding and learning about what is newer and better. And in this case, sun is the power we're seeking. The benefit that we have, it is an energy form that has been around for quite a while by now. And it's something that we use to every day. So in this case, change should come a lot easier. It's natural.
That's good. I think that's one of the things that interested me when I saw your vehicle. And I thought, wow, this is a pretty special looking car. So could you tell us what sets Aptera vehicles apart from the EVs that we're maybe currently seeing on the road today?
Absolutely. So when we design Aptera, we have two goals in mind. One is about zero emission, which we will talk about later. The other one is about design efficiency. And design efficiency starts with reducing the drag, which is improving the performance, making the car as energy efficient as possible. So we spend hours and tireless effort through repeated engineering process to get to where we are. So from the shape, as you pointed out, is one of the most unique form of vehicle you see in the market. In fact, it resembles a little bit of a dolphin because it's one of the most energy efficient being on this planet. The other side is the zero emission, which is about not using any carbon emission or produce any carbon emission in the process. So you see that electric vehicles will still need to be charged, which inevitably, it will still create some form of carbon emission. In our case, is the sun.
So you mentioned the dolphins, and my wife and I used to live out on the West Coast. We always enjoyed getting out on the Zodiac and seeing the sea life. So is that where the vision for this vehicle came from, or the shape? Where did the vision come from?
The shape, certainly. It is, if you appreciate the engineering of the vehicle, you will see that it will have the minimum drag, which essentially, now I'm going to look at my notes here, as I'm not an engineer myself. Drag means the force of the airflow against the motion of the vehicle. In this case, and in the case of a dolphin, you can see how fast and how little friction it creates when it swims. So the same philosophy and the same idea applies to this vehicle.
So do you think that the old way of thinking in automobile manufacturing sector maybe held back innovation with vehicle concepts and fuel and design?
Well, we respect the innovations and the all the technology that were developed of our forefathers. However, as you mentioned earlier, change doesn't come overnight. It's an evolutionary process. So it's contributed by new ideas, but we often base it on the experience and past practices. So as a company, we challenge that. And then we use that experience and all the different, former practices and create a new technology or add on to what we have created uniquely to have developed this vehicle. So, I wouldn't say that they hinder the innovation of it, but they form part of the evolutionary process.
Right. And I guess one of the important evolutionary parts of technology for your vehicle would be how solar panels have advanced in their efficiency over the years. Can you tell us a little bit about using solar panels on this vehicle?
Oh, absolutely. So the entire vehicle is covered with different solar panels throughout the vehicle. And our solar technology is different parts of the formula. So in addition to the design, in addition to the battery capabilities, solar is another innovation that we created. So we have these very small solar panel that we can adhere to different parts of the vehicle. And they are, in layman terms, bendable in different ways so that they will fit seamlessly into the design. So, and that's part of the signature. These solar panels are not hidden. They are, in fact, they form part of the look because we're proud of them.
That's very cool. It seems very innovative to me to look and see how the panels shape with or go with the contour of the car. And there's a calculator on your website, and so it's very sunny here in southern Alberta, as I'm sure you know. And I plugged our digits kind of into your calculator, and it actually told me that I would never have to plug this car in.
Exactly. So you pointed out two wonderful things that we have developed. So obviously, the energy efficiency of the vehicle through its design and through our battery innovation or innovative technology. So the range starts at 250 miles in terms of chargeability, but it can go up to 1,000 miles. So every day in an average climate, you charge up to maybe 40 miles a day. So if you drive within that range, which most people do on a daily basis, you never have to charge. And the other thing is the calculator you mentioned. It's really cool. So it shows different parts of the world where you are. And then you can click on that location, and then you add your daily travel mileage, and then you can see how often you need to charge. In your case, never.
Yeah. It's really interesting to look at the promotional information of your vehicle and to see just how efficient this has become. How would you compare the efficiency of the Aptera vehicle maybe with some of the traditional automaker EVs that we see right now?
Excellent question. So it's all about being better than the existing market, and we do. And it's not just technology alone, but it's a big part of what we do. So something I mentioned earlier, the drag coefficiency, we are one of the best in the market. So compared to other EVs, nameless, we are at least significant, double digit better in terms of drag coefficiency, which means we use less energy for the same distance. So we're pretty much the leader in the market in that sense. Obviously, on top of that, being solar is very different than being just pure electric.
Mm-hmm. Now, we spoke recently with an EV motorcycle manufacturer who lives just south of Calgary. He said that his bikes actually work better in colder temperatures. Do you have plans for cold weather testing of this vehicle?
Oh, absolutely. So when we test our vehicles, we cater to all markets. The thing about this sort of innovation, meaning, in the environmental space, the way to achieve our overall mission is to maximize the usability in different parts of the world. So we're designed with that in mind. Our vehicle would work in different sort of climate, whether it is, over 100 degrees Celsius or minus 20, 30 degree Celsius as well. Sorry, 100 degree Fahrenheit. So minus 20, 30 degrees as well. So it is designed with very harsh climate in mind.
Wow. And so how long has this vehicle been in the planning and, let's say, research and development phases?
Oh, it's been a very, very long journey for the founders. So the vehicle was first conceptualized almost a decade ago. And throughout that process, we have lots of renditions and the trial and tribulations of any startups. But this time we launched only about 2 years ago, and to amazing fanfare, I believe right now, and don't quote me on the latest number, but we have over 30,000 vehicles in terms of pre-ordered. So that's over $1 billion of pre-ordering. So the last 2 years have been a big journey for us in terms of market reception, in terms of the energy development, of the innovation side of it, in terms of the different partnership and the commercialization of the vehicle. So yeah, it's been a very, very exciting journey for the last 2 years. We cannot wait for it to see what happens in the next couple.
Well, it sounds amazing, even with the decade of from concept to where we are right now. Can you share with us some of the innovations and research and development that went into the project?
Yes, absolutely. So 3 key things, as I mentioned earlier, are the design itself. So the overall very unique design, which is with very little drag coefficiency. So that's one major part of the innovation, but also the materials that we use. So it's a very lightweight carbon fiber, and it's going to be manufactured in actually a very exciting partnership with one of the most prestigious suppliers on the planet, which I'm not privy to say at the moment. But that is another innovation that we have developed. On top of that, obviously, the battery. It's very lightweight. It's a fraction of what you see in the market, and that allows us to drive further with less energy. Last but not least, obviously, it'd be the solar panel itself. So we have different teams dealing with battery, dealing with solar, and dealing with design. So each of them have multiple innovations regularly, and we continue to enhance it.
So I'm guessing along with the different teams and the research and development, and of course we can never forget the engineering, there must be some very high quality parts that go into this. So do you see that the use of, going forward into the future, would you see that maybe the use of higher quality components, would they be coming from Asia or would they be coming from Europe or right here in North America?
Currently, the production itself is in North America. So I would say the bulk of the manufacturing, the design, and the research. In fact, we have a research team also right there in Alberta as well. So we're in discussion with the different government agencies about how they can support us in terms of furthering the research and development. And I think that's very important. So Canada, having a huge talent pool, having great, a market in terms of our interest, our passion, our understanding of the energy efficiency. I think this is a great market that we can spend more resource in developing and upping our game.
Right. So do you think that your company and this technology that surrounds it is opening the door to more specialized, maybe R&D or manufacturing in the United States and Canada?
Absolutely, 100%. So definitely in the US, we're doing a lot of the manufacturing already. So it is already realized. But in Canada, we do have, as I mentioned, a research facility, and we would like to expand on that when we get the resource to do it. And I believe, being a Canadian myself, I would love to take this ability to create, to innovate, and make Canada a much more or even more technologically advanced leader in this innovation and the sustainable energy world.
Yeah, we like the sound of that. And Canada has so many talented artisans and engineers and manufacturers. So we love to see that progress down the road with new technology. I wanted to ask you, has your company projected a lifespan and replacement program for your vehicle's batteries?
We do. I think that's still about to be developed. But right now, I think it would be a extended period of time. So I can't say the latest number as we continue to enhance that. But it would be a very long time before one has to replace the battery. So that in that regard, we won't be that different from the other EVs, and if not better.
Right. So who is your target demographic for this vehicle?
Again, excellent question. So one would think, with a new design, a new product, very unique sort of proposition, will only attract a smaller, more of a niche market. But based on the pre-ordering from different nations, generation, background of people, we see that this actually catered to a much wider audience. So obviously, those who are, environmentally, conscious, those who are really interested in new engineering design would be the, what we call first adopter. But we start seeing that the word spread. We see, anyone who has to drive a vehicle every day, from running errands to supermarket, to taking the kids to school, or just going on a road trip, could be using our vehicle. And not to mention the price of gas. So I think there is a huge market for using this. And also it could be a second vehicle too. So there will be people who have the primary vehicle and use this for other purposes. So yeah, I think the market is big.
Well, it's very exciting. I know we're looking forward to seeing the vehicles out on the road and even having some here in Canada. So unfortunately, Doug, this is all the time we have for today. I'd love to keep chatting with you, but I want to thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
That was Doug Liu, board member and strategic advisor for Aptera Motors. He joined us from his office in Vancouver.
Alberta's United Conservative Party leadership race is heating up. Now the party will be choosing its new leader to replace Premier Jason Kenney on October the 6th. One of those candidates vying for the premier seat is Rebecca Schultz, who left her UCP cabinet post as Minister of Children's Services to enter the leadership race. Rebecca, welcome to Bridge City News.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. So what sparked your interest in running to become the new leader of the UCP and potentially the new Premier of Alberta?
I just feel so strongly about the future of our province, and I know that the success of our United Conservative Party is key to the future of our province. I think that, as we travel across the province, and what I've been hearing from people is that there are a number of things going really well right now. Our economy is good. There are lots of jobs. Unemployment is down. But people also want to see a slightly different change in tone when it comes to the government, and they want to make sure that the government hears their voices, that they've got a voice at the decision-making table. And, I think we really need to stay focused on being hopeful and optimistic for our future, but also recognizing that people have some very real concerns right now, whether that be affordability or healthcare or education. And so, that's really the voice that I try to bring to the table. I want to be completely honest. I want to show humility, not just talk about it, admit when we've made some mistakes, and show Albertans that we're here to work for them, to listen to them, and that we hear, what's top of mind for them as well.
You just mentioned kind of why card-carrying members should vote for you, but what's one thing specifically that makes you stand out or different from all the other candidates in the field?
I would say it is my ability to communicate with people. I think we need somebody going into that next election who can, in fact, take on Rachel Notley and the NDP. That is our opponent as Conservatives. It's not each other, even though we've been through a very difficult couple of years. I think people want to see that shift in tone. I chose Alberta. I'm originally from Saskatchewan. And so when people say 4 years of an NDP government was really hard here in Alberta, I say try 16. Any room I go into across Alberta, there are a number of people who came from another province or another place. And generally speaking, they came to Alberta for opportunity, for that promise that if you can work hard, you can be whoever and whatever you want to be and chart your own path. And I think people are looking for that optimism, that different tone, that ability to resonate with people right across the political spectrum. As Conservatives, I would say we always talk about the center right, but show people that we can be a Conservative government that also just uses good old common sense and, of course, compassion when we make decisions.
Now, Rebecca, the UCP says it's a big tent party, but it appears to be a little fractured right now in that tent with a lot of animosity. What will it take to really unite the Conservatives once again here in Alberta?
That's a really good question, and it's one I get a lot. It starts with our team. We have an amazing team of MLAs right across this province that are hardworking and smart and dedicated. And I know that they want to be united. And like many party members, I would say there were times where they felt like their voice just wasn't heard at the table. And I would say when talking about my team, I spent a couple of days last week with your MLA, who is a strong voice for Lethbridge. At the table, absolutely no question, Emily Newdorf. But it's for me, it's building on the talents and strengths of the team. It's not about any one person, and so making sure that our team feels heard is priority number one. My other commitment was to travel to every single one of the 87 constituencies, knock on doors in every single riding, make sure that I'm meeting with every single CA board president and the volunteers to make sure that our grassroots party members know that in me, they will have somebody who will always listen and hear their concerns, hear where they're coming from. And I don't think that people expect to agree with every decision a government is going to make. Largely, the concerns sometimes are around how decisions have been made and how they're communicated. And so that's really the approach that I'm going to take.
Yeah, because some MLAs said, you know what, we're forced always to toe the party line. Our voices are not being heard. So how would you approach that problem and that issue as Premier of Alberta?
Yep. And, again, it does start with bringing our team together. And yes, we are a party. It's a party system. And I think there is always that question of, we are the party of different opinions. We value things like freedom of speech and diversity of thoughts and ideas. We want people to hold the values that they hold dear, and we respect those differences. Sometimes I joke that that's what makes conservative politics a little bit messy, but it's also one of the things that we need to continue to hold as one of our most important values. That said, we still have to show discipline. And so the question is, where do we have those discussions? How as a team can we come together and say, look, we are always going to value different opinions and different thoughts and different perspectives, but what, as a team, does discipline look like to us? And make sure that, we come to that as a team and know what is that line that we're not going to cross, and what's going to happen if that line is in fact crossed. And I think, largely speaking, people want to see that there's one set of rules for everybody. They don't want me to come and tell everybody what to do. That's not my approach. I'm not a top-down approach to leadership kind of person. But I think our team really does have to have that conversation around, what does discipline look like? Because we're going to need it as we head into the next election. How do we stay on message, on track, and still make sure everybody's voices are heard?
We don't know exactly what lies ahead with any future COVID-19 outbreaks, but everyone seems to have a different opinion on how this should really be handled. Are you in favor of vaccine mandates or lockdowns? Or are you the mindset that we should not see any more lockdowns in our province, which has really hurt small business owners?
I would say this. Throughout the pandemic, and I mean, those sitting on the sidelines or even those of us looking back now, hindsight is 2020, we learned a lot of things. We were faced with something that none of us ever could have expected and none of us had ever been through before. And I would say this, throughout especially the last couple of months of the pandemic, but with the various waves, and we saw obviously things changing from one wave to the next, we know a lot more now. We know that we have to address issues within our hospital system. We have to address capacity needs when it comes to the healthcare system. We've heard loud and clear, people want freedom of choice and autonomy over the decisions that they make. And I often, again, say we've spent, 2 years going through something very hard. We have been through something that has been so divisive, and I believe we should respect where people are coming from and focus on also the overall well-being and mental health of people. I mean, especially of kids. That's what I was working in before resigning to jump into this race. But we saw that the health restrictions had a very real impact, especially on kids and youth, but really Albertans right across the province. And, I think Albertans are looking for us to say, you know what, we hear you. We know that has had a significant impact, and we need to look at the issues around the healthcare system and hospital capacity to address future waves.
Now, you want to put in place what you refer to as affordability actions. The first one is the Alberta Activity Grant. What is this really all about?
That actually came out of the Child and Youth Wellbeing Review. We heard, again, health restrictions had an impact on kids and families. We need to prioritize the mental health and well-being of Albertans, especially of young kids, and help them get back into activities. I mean, whether that be piano or hockey or soccer or dance, things that kids are passionate about at a time where parents are really struggling with affordability. I mean, you know, I think of when I was growing up, I had amazing parents and a wonderful family, but I remember my parents making those really tough decisions. And I know there are parents who lay awake at night thinking about how they are going to pay their electricity bills and put gas in their car, and also help get their kids in things that they can be passionate about, and that will improve their overall well-being and mental health. So, I mean, I think that's one of the things that we can control. We don't control financial, federal monetary policy, but we do control what we can do with this surplus and direct it in a way that goes directly to parents and kids, supports the choices they make. I believe in parent choice. And so as opposed to necessarily funding one program or the other, I think those dollars should go to parents to help them out with their kids and their families. And also on the details of what exactly that looks like, I said, that's something I want to take to caucus too. It's not all about me and my ideas. I want my colleagues to weigh in on exactly how we're going to do that. But I think affordability, and it's not just I think, that's the number one thing I hear right across the province. Mental health and well-being, that's important too. So that was one of our first commitments as well.
Now, you've also proposed to implement an Alberta small business tax holiday. How would that work?
Well, and that's been raised by a number of organizations. I know our business tax is low, but we also have to recognize that the last 2 years have been really hard on small businesses throughout the pandemic. I know that there's been a lot of uncertainty. And a lot of small business owners have said, look, my business really struggled over the last 2 years. I absolutely believe that these entrepreneurs are at the heart of the entrepreneurial spirit that we all talk about. These are folks that drive our economy. They hire people in our local communities right across the province. And I think starting with the 2% small business tax holiday is an excellent way to show them, first, that they're valued. Second, that we completely understand what they've been through in the last couple of years. But third, that they are absolutely vital to our province's economic growth and recovery.
Rebecca, let's chat about healthcare for just a moment here. What really needs to be done to change and increase physician availability, decrease wait times, and increase hospital bed capacity? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and the physician, the family doc situation is something I did hear a lot about in Lethbridge. I know the Minister of Health, Minister Copping, has been working really hard on that as well, just to attract new doctors. And I know your MLA Newdorf, has raised that as well, and was able to update a number of people on the number of doctors that are now signing contracts and coming to Lethbridge specifically. But this is an issue that we hear right across the province. We need to make sure, that we have access to family doctors either in or near your local community. And I grew up in super small town Saskatchewan, and so I know the struggles that people face in rural communities, and especially when it comes to access to healthcare. Primary care has to be a priority in terms of how we recruit physicians, coming up with innovative and unique ways to get more young people from rural communities getting into med school and coming back and serving as a family doc in their local community. I think there is a lot that can be done there. And working with different areas across the province, because the needs in Lethbridge may not be the same as in Bonnyville, for example, right? So we have a really good opportunity ahead of us to work with those communities and get more family docs in the system. I think that a lot of our answers, we obviously know that we've got a Ernst & Young report that identified a lot of kind of the red tape within the system. We know that we invest more than other provinces per capita, but yet we don't have better outcomes. I don't think we need more reports. I think, honestly, the answer lies with our frontline healthcare professionals. Doctors, nurses have identified not just middle management, but layers of bureaucracy and simple changes that could be made within the healthcare system to really focus on allowing frontline workers to do what they do best and really transform the thinking in our healthcare system around having the patient at the heart of it and not a process or policy.
Now, what about education? There's pressure from the teachers union to change their curriculum, to decrease class sizes, to put less money into private schools, maybe even homeschooling. Which direction do you want to see our education system go?
Oh, that's a great question. I care a lot about education. I really do. My kids are 7 and 4. And I think right across this province, people want to make sure that we have a world-class education system for our kids. I believe in parent choice. I believe that, parents can make that best decision for them in terms of the type of education that works best for their child and for their family. And we need to maintain that. We have a long history in that front, no question. That said, I think curriculum, yes, there are a few things we've got great feedback on. English, math, financial literacy, those are all really great things, that we get a lot of positive feedback on. Continue moving in that path. There are some areas, though, where we missed the mark, and we need to rebuild some trust in that process and get some feedback and show parents and teachers across the province that we're listening, we've heard them, and that is definitely going to be a priority of mine. I also feel, one of the things I hear a lot is around class sizes, as you mentioned, and having teachers and kids in the classroom at the heart of the decisions we make and the funding decisions that are made. And we hear a lot about the government saying that school divisions have local authority, and school division saying government hasn't given us enough funding. I am a problem solver, first and foremost, creative problem solver. And I think we need to get to the table and look at, where's the money going? I mean, I'm from Calgary, as you mentioned, and, we have a school division that had a report that identified if we funded school divisions like others, or if the school division ran like some of the other major divisions, that we would have far lower class sizes. So my question is, how can we make sure that we're focusing on kids and teachers in the classroom? I made a commitment that I want to make sure we have more EAs hired. Absolutely. I think that helps with teachers, right? It helps bring down the stress level. It gives them some support in the classroom. It's good for kids, whether kids, that are struggling with mental health, or struggling in class, or have unique or challenging needs. We need to make sure that those supports are there. And I also do want to pilot some very true wraparound services to address the mental health needs that really respects that schools are the hubs of a community. And for really vulnerable kids and families, that's going to be where they need to get those supports.
Rebecca Schultz is a candidate in the UCP leadership race. The party will be choosing its new leader on October the 6th. Rebecca, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me anytime.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.